Senhoras e senhores, sejam todos bem-vindos de volta.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back again. We thank you for your presence here. We will resume our activities of the 2012 National Meeting of Industry under the auspices of ENAI. We have sponsorship from the following organizations: Drive Experience, INPI, IBDE, Braskem, BNDES, Andrade Gutierrez, Sebrae, SESI, and SENAI. At this moment, we have the honor of calling to the stage one of the great names, and we're going to have the main lecture by Paul Markillie. He's the editor of innovation of The Economist and author of the special report on the Third Industrial Revolution. Mark is one of the greatest specialists on the field of changes in production, in supply chains, and in labor markets globally as a consequence of changes carried out in the field of robotics, materials, and additive manufacturing. During the next 40 minutes, Paul Markillie will be speaking about the following theme: industry worldwide, changes and implications for Brazil. After his presentation, journalist William Wack will come back to the stage to conduct a debate together with the speaker. So let's have a round of applause and call to the front Mr. Paul Markillie for his presentation.
It's a great honor to be speaking to you today, and a huge privilege to be in Brazil. I'm here to talk about the future of manufacturing, and I always think it's best, if you are going to talk about the future, to start with the past. Now, the factory was born in Britain in the 18th century with the mechanization of the textile industry, and we saw processes that were carried out in homes moved into the mills, the big textile mills. The second important date in this story is the 7th of October 1913, and that's when the chassis of a Model T car was winched across Henry Ford's factory in Detroit. And as that car moved along, the workers added parts to it. Now, by the end of the year, the world's first moving assembly line had cut by half the 12 hours it used to take a Model T to just 6 hours. And a year later, they were down to 93 minutes. Now, we're now in the era of mass production. And mass production is ruled by two things, which is economies of scale and labor costs. Now, to obtain an advantage in labor costs, what we've seen is a huge migration of manufacturing offshore to lower wage countries. And this is what the world looks like now. We've seen America's share of global output in manufacturing decline and China's rise quite substantially. And China is now neck and neck with America. China, of course, represents the emergence of a vast new manufacturing superpower in its own right, but it is also a big new domestic market. Now, the picture is slightly different if you look at value added in manufacturing, and this reflects that many of the richer countries have clung on to the production of high-value products, but developing countries want to upgrade their own manufacturing base, and they want to move into higher value areas like car making and aerospace. So watch out, Brazil. Now, I'm not sure what this will mean for the future of manufacturing continuing in the way that we have seen it, because I believe things are going to change, and change quite dramatically. And for the past few years, I've been following a number of developments in manufacturing and in technology. And these make economies of scale less important, and they also make unit labor costs less relevant to some forms of manufacturing. And earlier this year I had the opportunity to write a special report about these developments, and it was called The Third Industrial Revolution. Now this report attracted a lot of interest, and it made the front page of some newspapers in China because of what we were saying. And since it's been published, there's been a number of other developments, and some of them quite important. So what I have for you today is a lot more new information about what is going on. So what's changing? Well, to put it simply, manufacturing is going digital. Yes, we've had computer-aided design and numerical controlled machine tools and other digital technologies in factories for years, but previous industrial revolutions took decades to spread around the world, and this third industrial revolution is gathering pace now at a substantial speed. And just as other digital technologies disrupted music, publishing, consumer electronics, banking, and retailing, this digital revolution will change the way manufacturing operates. Now, there are 5 important technological trends converging: much cleverer design software, novel materials, cheaper and better robots, online manufacturing services, and new production processes, including one that fascinates nearly everybody, and that's called 3D printing. Well, I'll begin with the first. Most products now begin life as a 3-dimensional prototype, and the same software is used to plan the production line and program machine tools. And the imagery is so good that many of the pictures we now see of products are coming not from photographers, but directly from the computer-aided design software. Now, using this software, you can explore new products in a virtual reality chamber. I've seen one outside there. And so you can sit in a car long before it's built, and you can decide whether you like the interior or not. And you can also drive the digital prototype. And many cars are now being extensively driven in a simulator on different sorts of roads in different countries and in different climates, long before a wheel ever touches the ground. And you can go inside products, you can learn how they work, you can see how they come together, and you can share that experience with others. Now, digital prototyping greatly speeds up product development. It cuts costs and it enhances innovation. Then we have new materials. Now, this shows carbon fiber composites being made. They're made a little bit like textiles, and this used to be a very labor-intensive process, but as you can see, it is now being automated. Align the weaves the right way, impregnate with resin and cure, and the result is a structure that's stronger than steel but half the weight. And that strength comes from the powerful bonds between carbon atoms, if you think of the same sort of bonds that make diamonds so tough. Well, manufacturers get 2 important things with carbon fiber. You get a performance gain. The strength and the lightness means you can fly an aircraft farther, you can drive a car faster, or you can, both of them, use less fuel. And you get a manufacturing gain because you can consolidate parts that previously used to require riveting or welding together into a single component, and that saves labor. Large sections of aircraft now are made with carbon fiber. As an example, if there's any petrol heads, as we call them, or car enthusiasts out there, you may recognize that this is the carbon fiber body tub of an MP412C. Now that's McLaren's new sports car, and this body tub is similar to the body tub used in a Formula One racing car. And that has allowed many drivers to walk away unharmed from terrible crashes. It used to take McLaren 3,000 man-hours to make a carbon tub for a Formula One car. This one is made in 4 hours with a semi-automated process. Now, what has that meant, and what has that meant for McLaren? Well, it's enabled them to open a brand new car factory in Woking in southern England in the middle of a recession. A combination of new materials and automation has meant they are now going into the car business to compete with Ferrari on the road as well as the racetrack. Now, this car factory doesn't look like a typical car factory. It's extremely quiet, it's very clean, and the workers don't wear overalls. They wear Hugo Boss designer workwear. But carbon fiber is not just for supercars. This is BMW's new electric car, the i3, and it too will use a carbon fiber body tub, and it's made as a single unit with automated technology. Now, car makers don't normally show you their crash tests. It's not the sort of thing they like to make public, but BMW were happy to show me theirs because this car performs so well that the doors could still be opened. And now Ford, we literally in the past few weeks, has said that it too is looking at using carbon fiber in its models, and it's starting with the front of the car, the bonnet. And Ford's interest is weight saving, which translates into lower fuel consumption and less CO2 emissions. Now, there's many other new materials, especially in the world of biotechnology and nanotechnology. And Brazil, of course, has large natural resources, which quite possibly could provide a huge advantage in this area. One example I am aware of in Brazil is a prototype production plant which Pirelli, the Italian tire maker, is using to extract silica from rice husks. Now, silica, it turns out, is very effective at reducing the rolling resistance of tires, and that will help a car to reduce its fuel consumption. And then there's very even stranger stuff. Now, what I'm showing you here is some work by a researcher at the MIT in America, Angela Belcher, and she uses genetically engineered viruses to make materials. And what you can see there is a small button battery lighting up an LED. Well, that battery was made by genetically engineered viruses using natural feedstocks. She's set up a startup company which is commercializing this technology, and they think it can be scaled up to make batteries for electric cars. It seems science fiction, but it's actually happening. And now the robots. Well, there are about 1.3 million industrial robots working in factories. Many of them are making cars. Average robot prices have declined by 40 to 50% relative to wage costs since 1990. But industrial robots are like mainframe computers. They're expensive to buy and to set up, and they can be extremely dangerous. You do not want one of those arms to hit you. And that's why industrial robots are fenced off for your own protection. Well, the next generation of robots are under development, and they're not going to be like this at all. These robots will be the PC equivalent. They'll be simpler, and they'll be cheaper, and they'll help transform the way the people work. One person working on second-generation robots is Rodney Brooks, who's an artificial intelligence expert who founded iRobot. And iRobot makes vacuum cleaning robots and also military robots, which are used in bomb disposal in Iraq and Afghanistan. Well, Dr. Brooks's new robot has just gone on sale. So meet Baxter. Now, Baxter comes in a crate. He can be assembled in minutes and is programmed simply by moving his arms to do the things you want to do. And he will not hit you because the robot contains various sensors, so it's safe to work beside people. Now, the funny face acts as a simple interface. You see it shows surprise there because it encountered something unexpected. Now, the interesting thing about Baxter is his price. Costs $22,000. Now, $22,000 is just a fraction of what it would cost for a hard automation area on a production line like that. And there's going to be more robots like Baxter coming from America, from Germany, Japan, and from China. Now, there's never actually been an easier time to become a manufacturer. A growing number of online manufacturing services available. Today, all you need to be a manufacturer is a good idea, a laptop computer, and an internet connection. Digital designs can be prototyped, priced, manufactured, assembled, and sold for you. And users rate how well these services work, just as they do on eBay and on Facebook. And it's all very familiar, it's global, and it works. And then finally we come to new production processes. There are actually a number of new production processes, but the one that's most remarkable and people find most interesting is 3D printing. And just a quick question. Has anybody out there got one of these at home? Can I see any hands going up? One. You've got one of these at home. Well, that's very unusual, I find, when I talk to people in an audience like this. I better explain what it is. What it is a machine called a MakerBot. And now a MakerBot is aimed at the do-it-yourself, the home market, and they now cost about $2,000. And for the past 1,000 years or so, most things have been made in a subtractive way. You cut or you bash and you remove material until you have the shape you want. 3D printing works the other way around. It's an additive process. It builds material up layer by layer. And that's why it's called additive manufacturing as well. Now, additive manufacturing and 3D printing are basically the same thing. It's just additive manufacturing is a slightly posher word. Now, the technology is about 20 years old, but it's come on leaps and bounds in recent years. So how does it work? Well, you start with the digital prototypes, the software I showed earlier, and then when you click the print button, the software takes a series of digital slices through the image and then sends those descriptions to the printer, and then the printer builds those images in a solid material. And there's a variety of ways it can be done. This is a MakerBot at work, and it's speeded up, and it's making, I think, a large chess piece there. And it's depositing filaments of plastic to build the object up. It's a bit like a computer-controlled glue gun. And the process is known as fused deposition modeling. Going up in price, you get more sophisticated machines, such as this one from Stratasys. They're one of the pioneers of this 3D printing technology. These machines can come in around the $10,000 mark or so, and they use multiple heads, and they can print different materials and indeed different colors. And an object can be rigid at one end and rubbery at the other end. This is another process that's using powders, which can be fused together with ultraviolet light or with lasers to build up objects. And parts with moving components can be built, and they do not require assembly. Any powder that's left over can be reused and recycled back through the system. And then for several $100,000, you get up to machines like this, which builds using a process called selective laser sintering. And a layer of fine powder is spread and then fused with a laser. The build tray moves down, more powder is spread, and the laser, again, fuses more of the material together, and steadily a solid object appears. Now, these machines can build in metal, stainless steel, titanium, and recently silver. The original use of 3D printing is into producing prototypes of parts because it's a lot cheaper and it's a lot faster than getting a factory to make a one-off item. Prototyping is still a big market and a big use for 3D printers, but as the machines have improved and the printable materials has grown, more things are now being made as final products. So what can you print? Well, you're limited in size really by the size of the printer. This is a dashboard for a car. It's a prototype. I think it's pretty ghastly. I would have sent it back and said, print me another one. And of course that's not a problem with a 3D printer. Or they can be small. And that's a shell for a hearing aid which would have been molded using wax probably, and it's made exactly to the shape of the person's ear. Well, more than 10 million hearing aid shells like that have now been printed with this technology. So this is a business that already exists. And this is something which I don't know how you would make that with any conventional machine. It's in fact a lamp, and it's printed in nylon by a Belgian company called Materialise. And yes, you can also print body parts. A jawbone was printed for reconstructive surgery for a woman earlier this year. Numerous medical implants are also made in titanium, and the first bioprinters are beginning to make small pieces of tissue and blood vessel for clinical trial. Livers, kidneys, even hearts one day might be possible. And the idea is that by using stem cells, the printed organs develop their own functionality, and there are no rejection problems if the stem cells are taken from the patient. There's a number of advantages in 3D printing. Economies of scale almost disappear. You need less raw material because you print only what you want and you do not have any waste material to cut away. It provides greater flexibility because changes only require a tweak of software, and this of course enables mass customization, and hence that's why the medical industry is one of the first adopters. We're all different, and they already have your CAD file, your design file, in the form of a medical scan. And labor costs are low. The machines will print day and night, and they don't take holidays. And they print complete parts that do not require assembly. Now, this results in new business models in manufacturing. These are some 3D printed cufflinks, and they're printed really to the design of the person buying them. And the jewelry industry is also turning into an early adopter because, again, very recently it has now become possible to print in 18-karat gold. And this is a knob for a cabinet, and it was made for a cabinet maker. And this is a tough thing to do because if I went to a factory and say, I want 6 of these, that's all I want, just 6, and I'd like 2 of those 6 to be 30% smaller because they're for the small drawers at the top, I just don't know what a factory would, using conventional manufacturing technology, what they would want to charge me just to make 6 of these. Well, the designer who produces these, she sells these online, and they're printed to order for 15 euros. Now, another development very recently is the printing of electronics within the structure of a product. This is a small drone, an unmanned aerial vehicle, or UAV as they're known, and it's a demonstration, but it was printed complete with circuits for its engine, lights, and an aerial for video relay. And the company doing this work is now looking at embedding aerials into the cases of mobile telephones, which would allow phones to be made smaller and simpler. Xerox recently developed a new silver-based ink as a low-cost way to print circuitry on or in materials such as plastic or fabric. And this little fellow is a toy, and it's like one of the toys made by the millions every year in Asia, except this one was printed complete with the electronics to light up its eyes, so it needed very little assembly. And a new research paper literally published last week by Warwick University in Britain and GKN Aerospace has shown it's possible to print pressure-sensitive materials, or piezoelectric materials, if you like. And these have been used to print a controller complete with working buttons for computer games. Some aircraft already contain 3D printed parts. These are titanium brackets. EADS, which is the maker of Airbus aircraft, would normally machine one of these brackets from a solid billet of aerospace titanium, cutting away 90% of the material. Well, that waste can no longer be used for aerospace applications. The bracket in the front is made in that traditional way. The one behind, well, that's been printed with a laser sintering machine using titanium powder. And there's no waste, and the bracket, you can see, it can be tailored more precisely to its role. And so it's stronger and it's lighter. And it's also, you may note, more elegant, which is a common feature with 3D printed objects because form more closely follows function. And again, it's back to the design software because it now has rules embedded in it to make the shape in the best optimized form. And because those rules are very much like nature has evolved over billions of years. Here are two companies already using 3D printing. The top one is Invisalign, a company in America, and it's using additive manufacturing to produce a new way of straightening teeth. So instead of having metal braces, they produce with 3D printing, they produce the molds, and then they produce these transparent braces. And gradually, as each set of braces straightens the teeth into the smile that you would like. And this is a mass customization business. The other company below is a Japanese one, and that offers a 3D printing photo booth service in Japan. And you walk inside, and it scans your body, and it prints a small replica of you, a mini-me, if you like. And the man with the cap on is a printed model of one of their customers. The top one here is a London company which prints customized dolls and models of the avatar that people use to represent themselves in computer games. And the one below is a San Francisco company which prints customized frames for glasses. Can't yet print the lenses, can print clear acrylic, but maybe one day lenses too. And things are also happening at the high end in manufacturing. Last week, actually 2 weeks ago, America's General Electric bought one of the manufacturing service companies which I had in my earlier slide. That's a company called Morris Technologies. Now, Morris Technologies, they say, will be printing parts for a new General Electric jet engine called the LEAP. The reason GE said it's bought this company is that additive manufacturing is the only way that it can see to produce some of the complex parts it needs in the future and to deal with some of the emerging new materials which they believe they will be using. And this is my own business plan, and it's called Acme Print-A-Part. Now what I imagine is, instead of being told by the man who's come to repair my washing machine that they no longer make that machine and so there's no more parts available, imagine an online file sharing service where a repairman could go and download the required design file and get the part printed to repair my washing machine, perhaps at the local hardware store or indeed with a 3D printer in his own van. Now, it's a sort of iTunes for physical stuff. But as you can imagine, I'm going to need a very good lawyer here because all the copyright and patent issues which these technologies are unearthing, they make reverse engineering very, very easy. So what does it mean for offshoring if labor costs and economies of scale come to matter less? Well, let's look at China today and the consequences for an export-led economy like China. You can see wages are rising there by 15 to 20% a year. These are in fact responses to an online debate we held on our website, and a number of these issues were brought up by manufacturers in China. So China is becoming an increasingly expensive place to make things. Now, some firms have already brought manufacturing back from China to the United States. The Americans call this reshoring. The chart I have here is a prediction by the Boston Consulting Group. And they reckon that in 7 industrial sectors, some of which Brazil is already involved, and quite strongly involved, the rising costs of production in China will make it more economical to shift manufacturing back to the United States. And they estimate that this reshoring by 2020 could amount to 10 to 30% of the goods presently made in China being instead made back in America. Now, let me hasten to add, this does not mean giving up on China, far from it. It's a vast market which firms need to serve, but it will no longer be the most efficient place to make some things for export. China will still have big advantages. This is a well-known product, the Apple iPad. Well, if you take it apart and do what they call a tear-down analysis, what you find is, apart from being an extremely profitable product for Apple, its worldwide labor content is in fact very small, $33, and just $8 of that is accounted for by labor in China. So why is the iPad made in Shenzhen, in China? Well, the reason is that what you have there is a highly sophisticated industrial cluster. There's an ecosystem of companies in southern China which are highly responsive to the demands of mass manufacturing. They can scale up and they can scale down every time Apple launches a new product. And that's why Apple makes its products in China. And as the late Steve Jobs said, these jobs are not going back to America. But not all of China is like Shenzhen. Elsewhere, infrastructure may be lacking, lead times can be long, and even in Shenzhen, that can be the case. Change can be difficult to accommodate, quality may have to be actively managed, and there remains concern over intellectual property rights. Well, in successful industrial clusters like Shenzhen and others, I find have 3 characteristics. And you can find these characteristics at some of the clusters you have in Brazil. There's an ecosystem of companies and suppliers involved in that industry. There are innovation and skills coming out of universities and other academic organizations that feed directly into those ecosystem of companies and suppliers. And also that ecosystem spills out its own startup companies, because spinning a new company out is very easy and they can flourish. Now, Silicon Valley is the granddaddy of all the most dynamic of the industrial clusters that we have. And it has all 3 of these characteristics in large measure. Now, I personally don't think governments can invent industrial clusters. Governments are often not very good at picking winners, but governments can encourage the ecosystems that emerge in a country with policies that help them to multiply and prosper. Now, in the world ahead, with these new manufacturing technologies, industrial clusters are going to be vital for both products and for innovation. And there's also lessons to be learned from abroad. I heard earlier today in the first part of this conference some mention of that. In this new manufacturing world, technical skills will be in high demand. Many people look to Germany as a good example of how to provide those skills. Germany has a much admired system of industrial research centers in the name of the Fraunhofer Institutes. And it also provides a system of apprenticeships and vocational training. But Germany is not an easy place to copy. Policymakers in the United States have wanted to set up apprenticeship and training schemes similar to Germany's, but they've found companies have just been unwilling to pay for it. And they have a lack of institutions to carry out that training. The Obama administration is now looking at using community colleges, which, working with local companies, can provide training for apprenticeships. The local approach can work very well. It's more responsive to the needs of small and medium-sized firms, and Brazil has plenty of small and medium-sized firms, just as Germany has with its famous Mittelstand. And these small and medium-sized firms form the backbone of German manufacturing. So what I believe is that Brazil could indeed be very well placed to benefit from these new trends in manufacturing. Smarter software, new production materials, better and cheaper robots, online manufacturing services, and 3D printing are all things which can benefit small and medium-sized companies. But there's also something else you need. You need skills and you need innovation. Now, Brazil has many natural advantages, of which I'm sure you all know. And in a world where low wage costs come to matter less, the decision about where to locate a factory will become much more complicated. The important things that future manufacturers are looking at will be time to market, the proximity of R&D facilities, the availability of skills, transport costs, flexibility of production, natural resources, and indeed energy costs. And the list of comparative advantages growing longer and more complicated. And perhaps most of all, countries will also need an entrepreneurial culture. Now, this is the maker movement. It began in America. It is very geeky and it's very artistic, but it's also going global. And it's stimulating people to start making things with technologies like 3D printing. And often they make silly things. They look like gadgets, and it doesn't look very professional. But don't dismiss this maker movement too easily, because I wouldn't do that, because I believe it is an agent for cultural change. Just about every manufacturing company I speak to complains about the difficulties of getting people to work in manufacturing, the difficulties of getting young people interested in making things. Well, this is happening under your noses. It's getting young people interested in making things. And these people could go on to work in manufacturing, and as some have already done, they may end up forming their own manufacturing companies, and perhaps even the next industrial clusters. This, I think, fits very well with the way innovation is changing. Growth is no longer driven by blockbuster inventions. Today, innovation is more incremental, it's more personal. You take the telephone. Once they were all the same, and like Henry Ford's Model T, they all came in any color you liked, so long as it was black. Then more shapes and more colors appeared, and the telephones became more customized when you could store numbers in them, and they could take messages, and you could leave greetings in them. And then the telephones became portable. More than 1 billion smartphones and tablet devices will be sold in 2013, and each will be customized to the owner's preferences by thousands of software apps, many of them made by individuals and small companies. Now, these people are already beginning to customize phones too. Every time a new iPhone comes out, there's a race online to be the first to use a 3D printer to make new cases and other accessories for them. And these new manufacturing technologies, of course, don't actually require a lot of workers, at least on the factory floor. So manufacturing will never get back to employing the same number of people it once did in the rich world. But that does not mean that jobs will fail to be created, because the definition of a manufacturing job is blurring, it's changing. Who are the people writing software apps for iPhones? Are they manufacturers or service providers? And in some manufacturing areas in America now, service inputs related to manufacturing account for around half of the manufacturing inputs into that business. Again, if you look at a jet engine today, these are made by a manufacturing business, but they are sold to airlines as a service. An airline doesn't necessarily buy an engine. It takes out a contract to be provided with power by the hour, and that contract is a service business. So how will 3D printing actually fit into this world? Well, let me say first away, it's not about to replace manufacturing. One day, far in the future, perhaps, but not now. And 3D printing is already being used in high-end manufacturing to help make small numbers of expensive high-end things in racing cars and satellites and jet engines and medical devices. And this naturally is what happens with a new technology. It starts at the top and it trickles down. Except additive manufacturing in this case is also coming up from the bottom. It's being used to make trinkets, to make craft items, gadgets and toys. So it's going to challenge mass manufacturing from two directions. So I would say expect to see the following. 3D printing will be used to make prototypes more rapidly, which will allow firms to put into production items faster and more cheaply, and that will increase the demand for shorter lead times and for more flexible production. And in fact, the link between product innovation and production innovation will become much stronger. 3D printing will also be used to make some of the tools needed to mass-produce items like molds and dies. And it will be used to customize mass-produce items. People will be able to design a new case for their mobile phone. Or indeed, as there is a business now where you can have the rubber grips for a power tool made specially to fit your hand. And 3D printing will replace some of the steps in an assembly line. And slowly but surely, you will see 3D printing and these other technologies I've been talking about becoming an essential part of manufacturing around the world. But most importantly, 3D printing and the other technologies I've been talking about lower the cost and risk of becoming a manufacturer. Now, this is something policymakers should encourage. If bureaucracy, finance, taxation, and other costs of doing business, again, what we were talking about this morning, are obstacles to starting a new company, then the entrepreneur will go to another country where those obstacles don't exist. And that could be a huge loss of innovation. Now, more than one person has remarked to me how individuals and startup companies in this sort of maker movement, if you like, has all the vibrancy of the early days of the Macintosh computer. So if you want to find out where the next Apple is going to come from, then this is possibly a good place to start looking. Now, I'll end my research, which is where I actually began my story, and that was at a giant trade fair in Frankfurt. And outside this place stands a large statue called the Hammering Man. And it's an image, according to its artist, of man using his mind and his tools to make the world we live in. Except inside that giant trade fair that's devoted to manufacturing, it's not like that at all. There's men and women sitting at computer screens, and it's all very clean, and it's full of all the latest high-tech machinery. There are no oily rags. There's no one in overalls. And of course, there's no hammers. You can't find a hammer anywhere, except this one. And now this hammer was kindly printed for me by a lady with a 3D printer. Thank you. Obrigado.
Paul, I just having a look at the audience. Just a few people need translation, so we'll talk in English, if you don't mind. And I'm really happy that you took up this challenge. I'm happy you took up this challenge because you are the foreign guy talking a foreign language after lunch. It's a tough one, I know. But it's, no one was asleep. I could see it clearly. It's absolutely exciting. Yeah, we'll do it in English. Okay. Yeah, it's better. So just a few people need a translation. And it's okay for you. Ele não vai precisar. Deixa. No one could get asleep on your expose, on what you're telling us. But I remember that old discussion. It was a book, it was a bestseller years ago, asking why the Industrial Revolution took place in your country and not in New Guinea. You think the third Industrial Revolution will take place in New Guinea this time?
I think you go...
Just...
Hello, yeah,
okay.
Sorry. Where will the third industrial revolution take place?
Yeah, this time will not be in England, will it?
It is certainly, it's being led by America because America sees this way of forming a renaissance in manufacturing. And it's being sold politically by a government that's very keen to create jobs and with low energy costs and a desire to get back to making stuff instead of making money in the financial community. There is a big political drive for this. But as I said, in fact, all these manufacturing new technologies are jobs light. They don't actually create that many jobs. They will create some new jobs. So it is initially being driven by America, but Asia is aware of this. China has its own 3D printing companies. China is looking at new materials. China is also beginning, quite interestingly, to sponsor its own maker fairs and its own maker movement because it is quite aware that it doesn't have that same kind of entrepreneurial culture of young people setting up businesses with new technologies.
You're not talking about the famous law of unintended consequences, are you? Because when you take up the role of the American government, you stress the role of creating jobs. So the third industrial revolution is more or less an unintended consequence of a political drive?
The idea of the creating jobs, I think, was separated slightly from the technology. The technology makes that more possible. It certainly does, and it's one of the reasons why you could bring those technologies back. But to go back to your first question about where this third industrial revolution could begin, I think it's going to be global. It's early days. It could be anywhere. America has run with this very quickly because it goes very much in its favor. But you also see it in Europe, you see it in small countries. You're seeing it in Africa, a lot of interest in Africa because you can use these technologies to make things, to fix products, to repair things that would be very difficult in some parts of Africa to fix a piece for a piece of hospital equipment, for instance. But with a 3D printer, it may just make a little bit of plastic tubing. Well, these machines can make a little bit of plastic tubing quite easily, and so you can get things back into production much faster. So it's really about who's going to be most creative with these technologies and who is going to be most innovative with it. So yes, America's beginning the drive on this, but it may not be all an American affair.
Which are the most relevant factors you'd put them on a list? You already stressed the role of government in the case of the United States. You are talking about young people with bright ideas and willing to take a risk.
Yeah.
Third, there is a matter of environment.
Yeah.
People like to get together with people that they recognize as such. So we should expect again a sort of third industrial revolution to take place in the most developed parts of the world. Are you not too optimistic when you're talking about emerging markets in this? I'm trying to provoke you.
You are, yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, obviously in the most development parts of the world you can do that because people I've spoke to have started making things again in Manhattan. Now the idea of factories returning to Manhattan may seem a bit odd, but the reason they're going there is because there's a creative community there that is very good on design and very good on style. Now, I happen to think I'm sitting in a country that's also very good on creative ideas and style and design.
But Manhattan is cheaper as São Paulo at the moment.
Well, the thing is that in Manhattan it's very cheap to set up a business, and it's also very easy for a business to not just be created but also to be failed. So the risk level is much lower. So I think that's the first thing you need. You need to have a business culture that allows new ideas to go into production and new ideas to flourish and businesses to be built around them. Because without that culture, you can have all the ideas you like and all the modern technology that you've got. And this computer technology, of course, you can design things on a laptop computer, but you can click the file and you can send it to a manufacturing company in another country to have it made and printed. So you just bypass any red tape or any regulations that you don't want to be involved in. And so you could have, the globalized world won't constrain good ideas. Good ideas will go global with this technology.
Paul, you have a large experience as a journalist covering China.
Yeah.
You have a first-hand experience there.
Yeah.
What I like to do is to ask you to draw a comparison between China and us and Brazil in terms of what are the specific advantages they enjoy in comparison to Brazil when you are talking about the third industrial revolution, and the other way around. Where do you think that we Brazilians are better in this race than the Chinese?
Well, the Chinese have a government that was determined to make its people rich as quickly as possible and to drive manufacturing and to bring migrant workers in and to help companies become big in manufacturing sectors. So there was a real state-driven idea there. But what you have there...
That was the real great leap forward.
It was the great leap forward, yeah. But what you have there are these big companies, and many of them, some of them came out of the military, some of them came out of the state sector. And there are private factories as well, but really it's a big corporate world. What you don't really see are people leaving and saying, I'm going to set up a company myself, and just me and 4 or 5 others, and we're going to make something. 2 things will happen. One is you just won't be able to get the permissions to do that, or it won't work. Well, the second thing is another big company down the road, a big Chinese company, says, oh, that's a good idea, we'll squash you and we'll take that idea. And you can find that in Korea too, and you can find that in other countries in Asia. Difference with Brazil is you've got lots of small companies here, and entrepreneurial companies and medium-sized companies. So you don't have that huge, big, monolithic structure. Yes, you have some big companies as well, but that's a very different structure there. It's difficult for me to put my finger on is if I wanted to start a company in Brazil and to manufacture some new idea that I've got using a new material and using robots that I can buy for $22,000, and I want to set up a factory and I need to bring in some industrial equipment and I need to do this. You know, can I do this in weeks? Because this is what these people do. They're into business in weeks, and they're selling online. They do their marketing on Facebook and on Twitter and YouTube. They don't go through the same channels. And if they're obstructed, then the idea is that, well, I'll just do what this other company did. I'll go to Manhattan because I can do all these things there.
Well, but Lenovo started in China, yes. And they bought IBM and not in Brazil.
They did, yes. And that's very true. And what they're looking for is brands, because that's another thing the Chinese would like, is a brand that people recognize and would trust. And yes, there are companies like Lenovo and the white goods consumer company and other ones that are emerging out of China. And they will be Chinese multinationals. But what you're seeing them evolve into is companies that will decide that, and as they are doing, that they too need to manufacture for the Americas and for North America. And they are now looking and opening up factories on this continent and in North America as well to produce goods here. Partly because of that's more efficient for them to do, just as the Japanese did with their cars years ago in America, but also because they can see the value in having a brand building exercise in the country they're selling into, and into tailoring their products more closely to the local market. And if you look at the Japanese car factories now in the United States and in Europe, the cars that they're making there have a fair bit of design input from the local markets, from local designers, and they build a bigger variety of cars. It's not the same car being made in every market. And that ability to be more flexible and produce a greater variety of products from the same assembly line is being enabled by all these technologies I'm talking about.
So what people usually say Brazilian creativeness and imagination and be good at design is our main advantage?
It's a big one. It's a big one. The ideas that people have, I mean, if you wanted to make jewelry, for instance, you wouldn't need a factory. You can use these technologies to make small trinkets and jewelry and just start doing that. The thing that you need to know is, can you actually do that without any great high cost of taxation or bureaucracy or red tape? What's stopping you doing it? Because you don't need to be an engineer, I'm sorry to say, to use this technology. You don't need to be able to look at a blueprint. You just need to be able to use a computer, and the kids are really good at doing this already. Being able to use a computer, make your design, and then click print or click send off to a manufacturing service, get quotes from somebody who can make it for you with 3D printing or with conventional manufacturing services, and you're a manufacturer. There's nothing to stop you these days.
One important and very interesting point you have addressed in your exposition was at the middle, I think, when you were putting some figures stating that quite a lot of what the United States is importing today from China will be again produced in the United States for several reasons.
That's right.
For several reasons. So Brazil has been squeezed out by the Chinese from the American manufacturing market. What will be your suggestion in terms of what is coming up, of what is developing in terms of third industrial revolution? Which would be your suggestion to the Brazilian entrepreneurs here? This is an audience of entrepreneurs. What should they start doing in order to catch up this race, which is already being raced ahead of them, and go and fight back in the American market?
Well, I think the first thing you need to do is look to your natural advantages. I mean, Brazil, unlike many countries, can build cars and can build airplanes for a start. And there are other businesses here. So you look at the natural advantages and you say these industries, these industrial clusters and these areas need all the encouragement we can give them. That is not necessarily financial encouragement. It could be having the right schools, having apprenticeship programs, having industrial demonstration centers where firms can share some of the latest technologies and see how it works, and people can be trained to using it. Because I think what you would then find is that although you're beginning with the traditional industries that the country has an advantage in, people will spin out ideas. I mean, the one which I mentioned before, if you have expertise in carbon fiber, in aerospace, well, the next thing is, why not become a manufacturer of mountain bicycles, because you can make them in carbon fiber. Why not make fishing rods? You can make fishing rods in carbon fiber. You can make snowboards, probably not appropriate for Brazil, but you could make fast ships. You could do all sorts of things. But the fundamental grasp of the technologies has been learned and mastered within the areas of expertise that the country has. And then people go out and move into new areas. And then if you've got a product that's innovative and it works very well, it can be sold on the global market.
Let's go back finally to your final question. Where the new Apple
will the new Apple come
will
from?
happen?
If I knew where the new Apple would come from, I would probably be a very rich person.
Okay, yeah,
but
I was asking in particular to tell me where.
I know where to start looking, and I think
will you be looking in Brazil?
You could be looking in Brazil. You're looking for. I don't think you'll find it. You won't find it coming out of a big company. You won't find it coming out of a big Chinese company. You won't find it probably coming out of a big American company. But you'll find it coming out of a small company, a small entrepreneurial idea. That's how the Apple Mac came into being. There was a big company called IBM that made a big personal computer, and it ran on a system called Windows, and that ruled the world, and 99% of us, that's what we used. And then somebody came along and said, there's another way of doing this. And they stuck with it, and they've come up with another machine, and they've since gone from being a computer maker into making iPhones, iPads, and again, continuing to revolutionize. Now, they were considered, the Apple was at first considered geeky, not very serious, don't take it too much to heart. It's a trendy thing. It's not very important. But that was just so wrong. And I think if you're going to look for it, you're going to find the next Apples of this world emerge as small companies with good ideas. And today, the risks and costs of actually becoming a producer and making that idea actually into production is becoming so much lower that those companies have a greater chance of flourishing. So they could be in Brazil, they could be in Africa, they could be in London, they could be in Manhattan, they could be in Australia, they could be in Mumbai, they could be anywhere.
And my final question, what is the time horizon you establish for yourself to see coming up such a bright, new, belonging to the third world, to the third industrial revolution?
Putting a date on this is tough. I mean, initially I thought that this wasn't going to, I thought this was going to happen. I really believed it happening. And it was, 25 years, we're going to see some big changes. But some of the things I've seen happening in the last few weeks with big companies like GE buying into this technology for serious manufacturing reasons, I think I'm coming down from 25 years to somewhere around 20 and probably a little bit less now, that we will increasingly see. I mean, many people here maybe have devices and products that have, if they're not made with additive manufacturing or materials like carbon fiber or have benefited from very sophisticated computer design, I'd be very surprised. It's just it's already happening, and I find it's happening faster than I thought it would have done.
So the one piece of advice will be to these gentlemen here, hurry up.
Well, I think, none of these guys are going to wait for you. They'll just go straight past, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much, Paul. Pessoal, muito obrigado. Eu acho que a Rosane está chegando.
I think Rosane is coming on now.
Da indústria da comunicação, por exemplo, da indústria automobilística, de energia, da construção civil. O futuro da indústria começa aqui e agora. 7º Encontro Nacional da Indústria. Os caminhos para o desenvolvimento sustentável e o fortalecimento da indústria brasileira.